How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I am an avid herpetologist, and today we're beginning a new video series that is intended for new players and experienced players alike in the Digimon TCG. We're going to be going over all of the color-specific staples and sideboard options that are available for players who are looking to fill flex spots. Let me go ahead and describe a little bit better exactly what I mean by this. So basically, when you are building decks in Digimon, you are ultimately allowed to have a total of 50 cards in your deck, 5 eggs, up to 5 eggs, and as many as 5 cards in your sideboard, depending on the event that you're working in. Typically, for those of you unfamiliar, what a sideboard is going to do is give you the option of playing some cards that are good in specific matchups that you may find to be a little too specific to be used in your main board. So cards that are going to specifically be good against very specific decks and strategies that may not do so much against other decks. So you may not want to play them in your main deck where they can end up what's called bricking. Basically means that the card is not going to do a whole lot for you. It's good, however, and can potentially shut out other decks. So your sideboard is basically to help give you an advantage when you're playing a best of 3 match in certain structured events. Now, for each color, the game of Digimon has a ton of cards that are available in your available card pool. We're now going into BT11 here soon in the States. We're in spoilers for EX4 across the oceans, so there's lots and lots of cards to consider. Now, when you are playing the Digimon TCG, generally when you are building a deck, you're going to do you're build around what's called an archetype. Basically, that means that you are going to have a set goal for your deck, and you're going to include in your deck cards that are specifically themed for that goal. Now, in Digimon, a lot of those archetypes are themed around specific mega-level Digimon in particular. Now, of course, there's lots of different decks out there, and there's lots of different strategies. Not all of them are going to center around mega-level Digimon, but as a general rule of thumb, a lot of the bigger archetypes, think things such as a lot of the X-Antibody line, such as Grandis Kawagamon and Metal Garurumon, Black War Greymon, Alphamon. All of these decks are decks that are themed around a specific mega and building up to that mega. You'll also, of course, lots of other decks, things like Security Control. You have decks like Gamamon that don't build up into a mega but have stronger level 5 ultimate level plays. But regardless, all of those decks are going to have a specific goal in mind. Now, with that, you're going to have specific cards that are built and designed to specifically support that archetype. We'll use the last deck I mentioned, Gamamon, as a great example. So Gamamon is going to have, of course, lots of copies of the Digimon Gamamon that you're going to use in your rookie slots. There's going to be various champions that are specifically digivolving onto Gamamon. So there's cards that are specifically made to support that archetype. What we're going to look at in this video are other cards. These are cards that, while could be used in specific archetypes, all of the cards we're going to go over are as generic as possible, meaning while you are trying to build your deck, you're going to have lots of archetype-specific cards to use, but these are going to be the cards you may use to fill the spots that are left over. Not all archetypes are Greymon, so not all archetypes have enough support to fill out the entire 50 cards by themselves, which means you're going to use your archetype-specific cards, and then you want to fill the rest of your slots with generic cards that are going to further your game plan, hinder your opponent's game plan, and things of that nature. So the goal of this video, we're going to see all of the generic options that are available to each color, and I'll talk a little bit about why you might include some of these options over other cards. Again, there's a very vast card pool of different cards that are currently out there. We are already, however many, I think like 13 total sets in, counting EX sets. We have tons and tons of cards in the card pool. So I'm not going to be covering all of the generic cards that don't specifically fit into an archetype. What I'm going to do is just cover a large pool of the cards that I personally think could reasonably run in any deck, in this case of red. So these are all going to be generic red cards that I think you can, in theory, run in just about any red deck, and it's not going to hinder your strategy. They don't require a lot of setup, and they're cards that you can consider probably regardless of whatever else you're running. Of course, there's certain ones are going to, theme certain ways over others. You're going to want certain ones over others, but all of these could reasonably be run in a competitive deck. That's basically what we're trying to get at. So to begin, we're going to talk about, and just like all of my other videos, we're going to start with eggs. So the first egg is probably the strongest of the red eggs that is currently out there, period, and it is a generic card, and we're going to talk about Gorimon from BT8. So this Gorimon has an inheritable where when attacking, as long as the Digimon attacking has 6,000 or more DP, you can draw a card. Now, no matter what you're running, it's pretty fair to assume that at some point you're going to be building up into a stack of Digimon that are going to have 6,000 DP or more. So right off the bat, you can hopefully kind of see where we're going with this. So this Goemon can, in theory, be run in just about any red deck. Now, not every red deck wants to be running this card. That's not what we're trying to say. What we are saying is that if you are looking for a 5th egg, and you've already used the 4 from your particular archetype and are looking for a good one to fill the last slot, and you're looking for card advantage in particular, Goemon is an excellent option. We also have an egg all the way back from BT1. That's going to be Yokomon. Now this Yokomon has an effect where when attacking, if you attack an opponent's Digimon, you can get plus 1,000 DP. So again, if you're playing a deck that is maybe worried about being able to swing over opponent's Digimon, you're going to be attacking into your opponent's Digimon a lot, Yokomon is a great option for just generic DP gain. Another really good DP gain egg that we got recently, potentially better, it may have power crept Yokomon a little bit, is going to be Goemon from BT12. This Goemon's inheritable is while your opponent has, while you have 2 or more Digimon in play, this Digimon again gets plus 1,000 DP. So as long as you have more than 1 Digimon in play, you will always have that 1,000 DP on your turn, whether you're attacking a Digimon or a player. There's also a Demi-Merimon. I apologize, I could not find my copy of Demi-Merimon for this video, but Demi-Merimon is another egg that also gives you the plus 1,000 DP swinging into security. I didn't bother looking for it too hard because, again, I think this Goemon kind of power creeps the other two just by roll compression, combining Yokomon and Demi-Mera into one. So if you are looking for generic DP gain, this Goemon is, of course, going to be a great option. You only need 2 Digimon on your field in order to turn it on. Now, there's maybe people who are wondering why I don't include Digimon. This is from the structure deck. This is another great way of kind of explaining a little bit more about the cards I'm including versus the ones that I leave out. Now, of course, again, there are going to be plenty of cards that I don't mention in this video. You guys may be surprised not to see, but generally speaking, the Digimon that I'm talking about is from the structure deck for Gallantmon, and has the effect where if you delete an opponent's Digimon, gain 2,000 DP. Now, it may be better than these cards, but in order to use that effect, you have to delete an opponent's Digimon, and not every deck is going to be capable of doing that. So basically, the idea for this is we're going to go over the most generic baseline slot filler cards that we can think of. There are, of course, going to be better archetype-specific cards. These are cards that are specifically there to fill flex slots and maybe side in or use in your sideboard if you need to. So with that, we're going to move on to a category that I'm going to be referring to as vanillas. Now, for those of you unfamiliar with vanillas, or the concept of what a vanilla is basically just a card game term, meaning the card that's being played has no abilities. In Digimon terms, all colors in the color spectrum, whether you're playing red, blue, purple, green, whatever, they're going to have certain Digimon that are going to share an identical stat line between each color. To begin with, the ones that we're going to be looking at to start off with are rookies that cost 2 to play and have 3,000 DP. Now, this stat line is very generic, and even in today's meta, I think it's actually pretty undervalued. Basically, these are going to be your baseline, so even though there's no effects, only playing this for 2 from your hand is currently one of the cheapest costs that you can possibly pay in order to put a Digimon out from your hand. If you're working on memory choking or things like that, being able to pay so little memory can be very helpful. Even if you have an empty board and an egg and raising, but you need to establish a board this turn, being able to play something for 2 and Digivolve onto it immediately can also be extremely helpful. For me, myself, as a Machine Dramon player, many of you know that I've actually been running the vanilla version in black of Hogurumon and now Commandramon because those 2-drop vanillas can be extremely helpful. Rookies tend to be one of the most wide bases that people are going to use when building a deck. You're going to generally have more rookies than any other stat line or any other level, depending on the archetype that you're playing. So considering using vanillas is always an option, especially if you're going to be building something more aggressive. Now, in red in particular, there are a lot of Digimon that are identical to Biyomon here. Biyomon is from BT1, but also sharing this stat line of 2-drop, 3,000 DP, and 0 to Digivolve. We have Monodramon from BT1. We have Toy Agumon from BT7. We have Gazimon from BT8. We have Mini Dekachimon from BT9. And now we also have Candlemon from the new structure deck. So basically, all of these cards, as I mentioned, they share an identical stat line. They are 2 to play, 3,000 DP. The only real differences between them are going to be their names and their card types. Now, depending on the deck that you're running, you may actually find synergistic reasons to be playing each of these. As one example, coming out in BT11 we're finally going to have some of the first support, especially in red, for avian and bird Digimon. So if you are looking to play that deck and want to fill some slots, you can consider this 2-drop Biomon as one of the potential options there, because it's going to have more synergies with your specific archetype. But all 6 of these basically do the same job. They are 2 to play, 3000 DP, 0 to Digivolve. Now, moving up into champions. Champions are a little bit weirder when we're talking about vanillas, but the vanillas in particular that I'm going to mention follow a very specific stat line. I'm going to call these the one-drop champions. Now, they're not one to play, but all of them are one to Digivolve, and that's going to be the most important part. Very few decks have aggression that's going to be coming out from the champion level, but all of them, or I should say most of them, a lot of decks out there do need to Digivolve very quickly from their rookies up into Ultimates. Ultimates where you start to feel a little bit more power. So being able to Digivolve for 1 and skip a stage and go straight into your Ultimates basically can be a very good play. And again, each color is going to have lots of Digimon that can Digivolve for only 1 cost. When I'm talking about vanillas, though, they follow the ones that Digivolve for 1 follow a very specific formula. Specifically, we're going to take a look at Fugamon. Fugamon is 3 to play, 3000 DP, and 1 to Digivolve. We have Meramon, 4 to play, 4000 DP, and 1 to Digivolve. You can already see where this is going. So basically, for this particular level with champions, generally speaking, when you are talking about the 1-drop vanillas, they're going to have identical play cost and identical DP. Now, how high you want each of those to be is going to, again, vary depending on the deck that you're playing. The last one that I have is for red is going to be Dark Tyrannomon, which again, 6 to play, 6000 DP, and 1 to Digivolve. So 3 to play, 3000, 4 to play, 4000, 6 to play, 6000. Depending on how beefy you want that body, you can pick really whichever of these you want. Now, generally speaking, if you're trying to rush down a stack, it's going to be, best to go with the cheapest option. In this case, it's going to be Fugamon. Now, Fugamon is, again, 3 to play, so you can play it for, in general, the same cost as a rookie, but it's also 1 to Digivolve. So it is going to be your easiest bridge from your level 3s up into your level 5s. But each one of these is doing a very similar job, and again, depending on the deck that you're playing, you may choose to, decide on different power levels, different play costs, depending on what you're really missing and what you need. For instance, there are decks that can actually play Tyrannomon, so Dark Tyrannomon may have synergies for you. Meramon, if you just decide you want a little more punch, a little more power than Fugamon would offer, then you can play one that's another step above. Now, as of yet, we don't actually have any 7-drop 7000 DP vanillas that Digivolve for 1, and honestly, I'm kind of glad for that. A little power crept, but there are other colors that have 5 to play 5000 DPs. There's just, as of making this video, there is not currently one for red, so these are the 3 available that are generic and will Digivolve for only 1 memory. Now, moving up into Ultimates, Ultimates get kind of funky. So when you're talking about Ultimates, very similar to champions, you're not specifically talking about Digivolve cost as much. That's not really what you're worried about. You're more worried about generic play costs. Now, when you're looking in generic staples for Ultimates, generally speaking, the ones that you're going to most want to consider are 5 memory to play. That is the cheapest that is currently available for Ultimates. Now, again, each color has staples that they're going to share with other colors, and that's going to be, in this case, Cordramon. Cordramon is an example of a Digimon that is Ultimate level, that is 5 to play, has 6000 DP, and is only 2 to Digivolve. This is again meant to be kind of a bridge Digimon. This is not meant to be a big flashy play. It is meant to be super cheap in every way so you can get up into your next level. There are absolutely still decks that are interested in playing these kinds of cards. Now, in the current meta, there are a lot of archetypes that are specifically looking for powerful inheritables. That's what makes that deck do what it does. However, there do still exist decks that are interested in just hard playing things and going for very quick access to mega level plays. And playing 5-drop vanillas is a great way to do that. Now, most of the 5-drop vanillas that all colors share, again, have this stat line. They're 5 to play, but also have a 2 Digivolution cost, which is cheap for by Ultimate level standards. Most level 5s cost 3 on average to Digivolve. So Digivolving for 1 less, again, is meant to serve as a bridge. So for only 3 memory, in theory, you can do one of your vanillas here onto an egg, 1 memory into one of your other red vanillas, and then for 2 more memory, go up into Groundramon. That's only 3 memory spent, and you are already at the Ultimate level. Now, there are 2 other Digimon in red specifically that may not necessarily have foils in the other colors, but they are still 5 to play, so I want to talk about them. And these do also have identical stat lines, and that's going to be Vermillimon from BT4 and Triceramon from BT5. Both of these Digimon maintain that 5 to play cost. However, they are also taking an extra Digivolution cost point, so they are 3 to Digivolve, which again is pretty average, and have 8,000 DP instead, which is actually a little bit high. So if you're talking about averages, basically these two are in decks that are specifically looking to rush down a mega play as quickly as you can. You're not worried about inheritables, you're not worried about anything else, you just want to get to your mega plays. This playstyle was a lot more popular in the early days of Digimon, where in like BT1 and BT2, Red and Blue Omnimon were some of the best decks in the format. So being able to drop a 5-cost ultimate and immediately go up into a mega so you can get to your Omnimons faster was going to be a lot more important, but these cards do still have relevance today. If you are looking for a way to just very quickly bridge the gap into your mega level plays, you can consider any of these 3 cards. All 3 of them have that same cheap play cost of 5 for an ultimate, so something worth considering. Now there are 2 mega level vanillas that I'm going to talk about for this particular color. The one that is, again, the staple that is shared with all different colors is Phoenixmon. So all colors are going to have a mega that is 10 to play, 12,000 DP, and only 2 to Digivolve. Once again, this is meant to be a bridge Digimon. This is a Digimon where you're trying to get into level 7 plays. You can get there easier. Having only 10 memory to play means no matter what memory you're at, you can always hard play this. It's only 2 to Digivolve, which is again very cheap for a mega level Digimon, and has 12,000 DP, which is meant to be basically the average. Again, in the early days of Digimon, when you were talking about trying to rush into Omnimon, these cards were absolute staples. Not so much in today's meta. There are lots of more memory efficient and cheaper ways to get up into megas and even level 7s much faster, but again, if you're looking for something just to fill some slots, this is definitely the place to do it. Now, ultimates and megas as a whole generally do tend to be a little bit more cutthroat when you're talking about getting deck slots. So these are probably less likely to see play, but these again are still generically cheap and cost efficient that you can consider if you're looking for ways to fill any extra slots. Now, I mentioned there are 2. Technically speaking, it's not a by-the-books vanilla, but there is another 10,000 DP 2 to Digivolve Digimon in red, and that is actually Spinomon. Now, Spinomon, as I mentioned, 10 to drop to Digivolve, but it's only 10,000 DP. Instead of having the 12 that most other vanillas would have, it has an effect that gives, on your turn, an additional 3,000 DP. So if you decide to just go that route, and you just want to be spicy, you can consider playing Spinomon, which, even though you're trading 2,000 DP in security checks and on the opponent's turn, will give you a 13,000 power beater if you just decide to Digivolve up into this. Again, there could be reasons that you may choose to play one over the other, including type synergies, but yeah, that's going to about do it for our vanillas. Now, vanillas, as I mentioned, they're kind of power crept in a lot of ways out of the meta. However, especially on the lower end with rookies and champions, these cards absolutely still can and sometimes still do see competitive play. If you're looking for ways to fill in a few of those extra slots, a lot of archetypes only have 2 sets of rookies and 2 sets of champions, which are usually not enough to fill all of those level spots that you're trying to fill in a typical deck. You can consider vanillas as a very easy placeholder. All right, we're going to go back down to rookies now, and we're going to be talking about rookies that have generic inheritables, where again, if you were trying to fill those slots and vanillas aren't quite doing it for you, these are also some very acceptable options. To begin with, we have possibly the best definition of a generic staple I've ever seen. That's going to be Agumon from the very first structure deck, Red. Now, this Agumon is 3 to play, 2,000 DP, and has the generic inheritable where your Digimon gets plus 1,000 DP. It's easy, it's simple, there's not a whole lot to talk about here. If you are concerned about getting your DP just a little bit higher and the other in-archetype effects that you're using are not enough, you can consider playing this Agumon. In the same vein as DP gain, we also have Agumon from BT7. Now, this Agumon has the same stat line, but it's inheritable instead. Says when you are attacking your opponent's security, or I guess attacking the player in general, this Digimon gets plus 2,000 DP. So again, if you're worried about security checks, this Agumon in particular is very good in OTK decks. Decks that you're going to be potentially worried about making sure that what you're swinging in with could have a lot of security checks. You want to make sure it survives all those checks. This Agumon is the way to go. It's a phenomenal card for that. Also, in the same vein as attacking a player effects, we have Biomon from EX1. This Biomon, again, has that same stat line. It's very standard for rookies. 3 to play, 2000 DP. Has the ability where, when attacking, once per turn, if this Digimon attacks a player, you can then draw a card. So if you're not worried about your DP gains, but would like to make sure you have more sources of card advantage and card draw, this Biomon is a great inclusion. There's actually quite a few decks that I've seen kind of going around over the last couple of sets that do tech in copies of this Biomon, just as one extra little, again, kind of slot filler, which is the whole point of going over these in the first place. Now, one kind of neat card to talk about that not every color has access to, but a nice generic tech card that red does have, is actually Biomon from Structure Deck Gallantmon. Now, this Biomon is 4 to play and has 3000 DP, so a little more expensive, but also a little more DP. It cannot attack players, however, it does have Blocker. Not many decks have rookie-level blockers. Really, the only other primary one is going to be Black, which does have a couple of rookie-level blockers, just because blockers are kind of Black's whole thing. Technically speaking, there are other blockers available in other colors, but a lot of them are reliant on having either archetype-specific cards or other colors in order to turn on Blocker. This Biomon does not require any other setup. It is just a nice generic 0 to Digivolve, 4 to play, 3000 DP blocker. And even though it cannot attack players, meaning it can't check security or attack for game, it is still able to attack over Digimon, which is not super relevant, but it is important to mention. Now, the last thing we're going to be talking about in our rookie lines, and definitely one of the most important cards, themes that you're going to see amongst all of the different colors, are what we call floodgates. Now, if you're not familiar with the term floodgate in any card game that you're playing, floodgate is a term for cards that are going to stop your opponent from doing things. Basically, these are cards that are designed to actively hinder what your opponent is doing trying to play the game. Now, red currently only has 2 floodgates. They have Gaussmon, which is 3 to play and 2000 DP. Now, this Gaussmon has an opponent's turn effect where your opponent can't reduce Digivolution costs. So the floodgate here is if your opponent is trying to play into decks, for instance, like Black War Greymon has effects that make Digivolution costs cheaper. This is actually going to get a lot better in coming sets, as we're seeing a lot of new support in BT12. Excuse me, again, in BT12 and onward, that are going to say Digivolve for a cheaper cost. These kind of floodgates are going to start going up in value. Not necessarily monetary value, but definitely in playability value. So mark my words now, you are going to probably want to start using a little bit more of floodgates that do this, that prevent reduction of Digivolution cost. It will help slow your opponent down in the long run. Now, the other thing about Gaussmon that actually makes it very unique is it actually has a your turn effect where for each other Gaussmon you have in play, or no, excuse me, your other Gaussmon in play get 3000 DP, which is very interesting. No other floodgates currently actually have a DP boost effect that make rookie level beaters. So I just think that's kind of funny. If you have 3 of these in play, they're getting 6000 DP and become 8000 power beaters, which I think is just very, very funny. But the other and debatably currently more important floodgate is going to be Solarmon. This is going to be from the new Structure Deck Jesmon. It is 3 to play, 3000 DP, has an all turns effect, so this works on both turns, that's important to remember. Neither player can reduce play costs. The big reason people play this is for 2 reasons in particular. Number 1, this is going to stop digicrossing. So the digicross mechanic says you can add Digimon from your hand or field underneath to reduce the play cost. This will stop that from happening. So Blue Flare, for instance, and Crossheart is still around. They're both still meta-relevant threats. This is going to basically, instead of paying 3 for their Blue Flare Metal Greymon, they still have to pay the full 7. So basically, instead of doing 3 and then rushing, you're basically forcing them to pass turn. And of course, the other big reason to run these floodgates is Death Exmon. Now, it is, of course, worth mentioning, these floodgates are both players' turns. So the floodgates that prevent reduction of play cost, they will also prevent you from reducing your own play cost. So you do need to be careful in the decks that you're playing these. Now, these are absolutely still generic and are some of the best sideboard cards that you're probably going to want to be considering, because these are going to be very, very powerful against specific decks. And as a rookie in particular, it's very easy to play these out, and if you need to turn them off, for instance, if you need to turn off Solarmon's effect, you can Digivolve on top of it, and then hard play something if you need to. So being able to play around floodgates is a very big part of Digimon. All colors have access to floodgates that do various things, and as I go through the different color staple videos, we're going to be talking about all of them, so stay tuned for those. But these are the 2 ones that are currently available in red. Now, it's worth mentioning again, Gaussmon does say only on the opponent's turn. A lot of the older floodgates that have those effects, the ones that don't reduce play costs, and other ones as well, specifically say opponent's turn. So if you are playing a deck that does reduce play costs, you are still able to play these completely scot-free. It's not going to affect you. All right, we're going to move up into the champions. Now, we do have quite a few champions to talk about as well. Kind of surprising, actually. Now, there's, again, going to be general staples that are going to be color shifted from one color to the next that all colors are going to have access to. But the primary staple that we're going to talk about in red is going to be, no surprise to anyone, it is potentially the best champion level Digimon in the entire game. That is Greymon, again, from the first structure deck. That first structure deck was loaded. I'm going to tell you guys what. So this Greymon is 5 to play, 4,000 DP, and is 2 to Digivolve, so very standard stat line. But the inheritable is a generic security attack +1. Giving security attack +1 with no conditions doesn't happen super often, and it definitely doesn't happen on champions. This is the only champion that has a generic security +1 inheritable. Now, there are others that require you to jump through some hoops, but no other card in the game does exactly what this Greymon does. At the champion level, just giving that extra aggression. It is an incredibly powerful card. If you are playing especially things like any kind of OTK deck, this is always something that you can consider as one of your slots. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about, I'm sure people are very tired of hearing about at this point, but we're still going to do it because all colors have these, is going to be hybrids. Now, Red's hybrids, we're specifically going to talk about 2 in particular. These are going to be the ones that are able to Digivolve for a cost of 2. Even though these may have archetype-specific effects, like the Burning Greymon here does have an extra effect when Digivolving if there is a specific Tamer or hybrids in the stack, it's still able to Digivolve for a cost of 2, so it puts it on par with a Gunimon. You can technically, for all intents and purposes, throw out those other effects. You can still use this as a generic staple, depending on how you want to be playing your deck. So both of these cards are able to Digivolve onto your Tamers. If you're not familiar with hybrids somehow, if you've been living under a rock, hybrid Digimon are able to Digivolve directly onto a Tamer that you have in play, which is most often used for closing out the game if you need one final attack. Because swinging into security, you may hit removal that can wipe your board, but you're probably not going to be hitting anything in security that's going to wipe your Tamers, making them very safe. So as long as you have 2 memory, you can Digivolve it, and then swing for game as long as you've cleared their last security and the turn is still yours. Now, a Gunimon is, for all intents and purposes, a vanilla outside of its Digivolution cost. 5 to play, 5,000 DP, 2 to Digivolve. All of the different colors have this version of hybrid. They are all going to have a generic 5 to play, 5,000 DP, 2 Digivolution hybrid. Now, Burning Greymon, on the other hand, is just slightly different. As I mentioned, it does, technically speaking, have that effect that will give you bonuses if you are playing a hybrid list or Digivolve onto a specific Tamer. However, it is still 6 to play, 6,000 DP, and is able to Digivolve onto a Tamer for, again, a cost of 2. So removing those other effects, you can still Digivolve it for 2, and it's going to give you 1,000 extra DP for the cost of 1 additional play cost. So again, if we're talking about generic staples and you are looking for something with a little more oomph, you are able to do that. For me personally, Burning Greymon is also a Dark Dragon in its traits, so I've actually been running some copies of this in my personal Dorbeckmon OTK list. So again, you may find some typal synergies that you can make use of as well. Moving into our next line of generic staples that are available to all colors, we're going to talk about blockers. Now, all colors have various champion level blockers with this particular stat line. These are some pretty old cards, but they are still around, and you can still consider them. This is Cordramon. Cordramon is 5 to play, 6,000 DP, 2 to Digivolve. Has blocker, meaning it can stop an attack by suspending itself and then doing battle with the attacker. And also has this effect that is shared with all of these blockers with the same stat line, which is when attacking, lose 2 memory. All colors also have a slightly altered version of those blockers, where it is 6 to play and 5,000 DP. So you basically switch the DP and the play cost, with the additional benefit of having only 1 memory to Digivolve. Now, there have actually been quite a few situations where I still play these in various competitive decks, because being able to Digivolve for only 1 and have a blocker in play is a phenomenal benefit in a lot of situations. It's absolutely worth considering playing some of these cards. I've been playing them in my Digimon list. That's just one example, but depending on the color you're in, again, you may have typal synergies and reasons you want to be playing these cards, but if you find yourself needing a blocker, a lot of decks have a hard time pushing for lethal and not instant losing to a rookie in the raising area. So if you ever are finding yourself in that situation and you want blockers in red, these are going to be your 2 go-to options. These are fantastic ways to go about that. Now, the last two things that colors have available are going to be security rookies. Now, or security champions. I still don't have security rookies. Security champions, there's initially a set where they all share the same stat line. They are vanillas outside of their effect, which is going to be 5 to play, 4,000 DP, 2 to digivolve. The security effect, if this is checked in security, at the end of the battle, play this card for free without paying its memory cost. So these are going to basically just be extra sources of aggression and extra bodies that you can check in security. For red, this particular color shifted line is going to be Greymon. Now, there are also some colors that have secondary security champions. Now, the one in red is actually pretty solid and does still see occasional play from time to time. We are talking about Geo Greymon. Now, this Geo Greymon is 6 to play, 5,000 DP, and again, 2 to digivolve. Has that same security effect at the end of the battle. You can play it for free, but has an additional effect where on play, you can delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 4,000 DP or less. So not only is this an extra body out of your security, but if your opponent is not playing around this and is swinging with their tallest bodies first, if they check this in security, you can play it for free and then get an on-play effect to instantly pop one of your opponent's 4,000 DP or less Digimon. This can deal with floodgates. It can prevent your opponent from having just enough attacks to hit you for lethal. This guy in particular is a phenomenal staple. So again, if you are running a little bit loose on your champion slots and you're looking for ways to fill them, Geo Greymon here is an excellent card that you can use to fill that extra little void. All right, next we're going to be talking about ultimates. Now, there's honestly not too much to talk about with ultimates as far as staples go, just because, again, as I mentioned earlier, ultimates tend to be a little bit more packed in terms of deck space. So these are going to be the slots where, generally speaking, most people are only running 2 sets of 4 each of whatever their archetypal ultimates are going to be. So very rarely are you going to actually have flex spots in your ultimate level 5 space. However, there are still times where that comes up, so we're just going to talk about 2 in particular I thought that were worth mentioning. The first one is going to be Megadramon. This is Megadramon from BT6. It is 6 to play, 7,000 DP, digivolves for 3. Technically, it is also treated as black on your turn, but for all intents and purposes, it's mostly a vanilla effect. It also has a Your Turn effect where, as an inheritable, that gives a generic plus 2,000 DP. So we've already talked about a lot of DP gain effects. We don't need to go too deep into this one, but that's a generic gain 2,000 DP on your turn. And we also have Volkdramon from BT4. This Volkdramon is 7 to play, 7,000 DP, 3 to digivolve, and much like our Greymon in our champion slots, has a generic security attack plus 1 inheritable. Now, there are a lot more security plus 1 inheritables that you can be found at the level 5 slot. So this one is going to be competing a lot harder for deck space. But again, it's generic. So if you're playing an archetype that doesn't necessarily have access to that and does want to be building up into a mega level threat, this is another generic security attack plus 1 that you are able to run if you so choose. Now, in addition to these ultimates, now we're going to get to start to talk about some of the really cool cards as far as tech options go. Now, these are going to be, again, flex slots. Mega level tech cards are going to most commonly be found in your sideboard. Now, you can absolutely mainboard some of these cards, but the reason these cards are included, especially in a video like this, these are going to be cards that are able to slot in that can do devastating things to your opponent, because if they are playing something specific, they are going to have very powerful effects that may not do a whole lot against other archetypes. Now, we're going to begin by talking about the OG sideboard card himself. Back before sideboards even existed, this card was seeing play against any number of different decks that existed. We are going to talk about BT2 Volcanic Dramon. Now, Volcanic Dramon is 11 to play, 10,000 DP, and 3 to digivolve. It has a security attack plus 1 ability, but that's not really why you play this card. Back in the day, you would play this card for the on play, which simply deletes all of your opponent's Digimon that have 4,000 DP or less. Now, sadly, as much as I love this card and have a whole lot of nostalgia around it, this has definitely been power crept in today's meta. Now, it's cool just to mention that if you are playing the Link Dragons archetype, you can actually digivolve into this and activate that effect, but again, it's been very much power crept. You're going to have better options than Volcanic Dramon for dealing with wide board states, but this is still a generic effect, and it is still good enough that I think it can at least be considered for competitive play. Being able to wipe your opponent's board of 4,000 DP or less as a global effect is still at least a pretty decent effect. Next is going to be one of the most powerful generic level 6s, I personally think, in the entire game, and that is War Greymon from BT1. Now, this War Greymon, I do see plenty of decks, especially red decks, using as a sideboard option, especially with so many decks like Security Control going around that have very scary security options that you can ultimately check. So this Digimon is 12 to play, 11,000 DP, 3 to Digivolve, all pretty standard. Has a when Digivolving effect to give it plus a security attack for that turn, so a little extra check, which is always nice, helps to close games out. But the real reason people play this particular War Greymon has a your turn effect where this Digimon does not activate security effects of options that it's going to check in security. So let's say that you are playing against Security Control and you swing in with this War Greymon and your very first check is Chaos Degradation. Happens to me all the time. That effect will not activate. This War Greymon is able to swing scot-free, making it incredibly backbreaking for archetypes that are relying on their security to keep them alive. The next mega we're going to talk about is Avenge Kidmon. Now, Avenge Kidmon has a lot of things to talk about here. This is another card that is very commonly seen in sideboards and mainboarded in some Security Control decks because it is generic in what it does. So this Digimon is 12 to play, but not very often, and we'll go over that. It is 11,000 DP and 3 to Digivolve. When you play this Digimon from your hand, reduce its memory cost by 1 for every option card in both players' discard piles, discard trashes. So this is a mega that is going to be coming down for much cheaper. There are so many decks that can make use of this card, and there are so many decks this card is very powerful against. Back in the day when this card first came out, it was primarily used as a counter for Beelstarmon decks. Now, Beelstarmon also has that effect where it gets cheaper for all the options in your trash, as well as Digimon that have Three Musketeers. So the whole idea was you're going to put a ton of high-cost option cards in your trash and be able to play it for super cheap. So Avenge Kidmon has an on-play effect where you can return all cards with Three Musketeers in their traits and all option cards from both players' trashes to the bottom of their owner's decks. Then if 7 or more cards are returned this way using this effect, delete one of your opponent's Digimon with Three Musketeers in its traits worth 8,000 DP or less. So if you are playing against decks that are very trash-heavy, that could be really any purple deck, this card is phenomenal because not only are you shuffling away all of the options and things that they put into their trash, but it comes with the additional benefit of a very cheap mega level body that will also be spot removal when it comes down. So Avenge Kidmon, it's very, very powerful. A couple people, my locals, are hoping this card eventually gets either banned or limited just because of how generically strong it is. But currently it is still completely legal at 4 copies, and you would be nuts if you didn't at least consider putting at least a copy or 2 of this card somewhere in your deck, especially if you are playing red. Now, the last red card is actually the one I've been the most excited to talk about because I think people are sleeping on this right now. This card, as a sideboard option, I think is super spicy and super great, and that is Zuquamon. I apologize if I butcher that name. I know it's pronounced in the anime. I haven't seen it in a while, but it's a wild name. Zuquamon, I think, is correct pronunciation. But this is one of the 4 Digimon Sovereigns, which each share effects that basically gain you memory back when they Digivolve and have very powerful when Digivolving effects. Now, this particular Digimon is 13 to play, 13,000 DP, and 5 to Digivolve. Those are standard for the Digimon Sovereign Megas. When Digivolving, your opponent chooses one of their Digimon, and then you delete all Digimon other than the one chosen by your opponent. For every Digimon deleted by this effect, gain a memory. The reason I think this card is being so slept on for right now is this card is basically one of the best side deck options for go-wide decks. Cards like Hydramon and Bloom Lordmon come to mind, an archetype that is very good at building very wide boards very, very quickly. Zuquamon basically says you get to pick one thing and you wipe all the rest. Not only do you wipe all the rest, but for every body they had in play, you then gain memory back. So you're most likely not Digivolving for 5. It's not going to be super uncommon. The games where this card really is good, you are going to be gaining back potentially that full 5 and then some. There are other Digimon Sovereigns that can gain even more memory than that, depending on the decks they go in. But I think Zuquamon is a phenomenal sideboard option that should be considered if you are playing a red deck. If you're having any kind of issues at all with decks that are going wide, again, specifically like Hydramon, Bloom Lordmon, Jesmon is another great example. This is a great card that basically help keep your opponent's field in check. Not only that, but it even comes with an added benefit effect where, on your turn, when an opponent's Digimon is deleted, this Digimon gains security attack +1 for the turn for each of those Digimon deleted. So let's say that your opponent is on Hydramon. They're playing Bloom Hydra, and they have 5 Digimon in play, plus, of course, their big stack. You Digivolve into Zuquamon. First of all, they have to destroy 5 of their 6 Digimon. They can, of course, keep their big stack, but the rest of them are gone. Not only that, but it costed nothing, because you deleted 5 things and gained 5 memory back, and now your Zuquamon checks 6 security. That is bonkers. I think this card has been slept on for a while just because in BT9, we were very much in a format where people were building single stacks, and as long as they can keep that stack around, they don't care. They're not going to care if they have to delete 1 or 2 other things, but now we're in a format where go-wide decks are becoming a lot more prevalent, and if you are looking for a cool catch your opponent off guard and end the game out of nowhere card, go Zuquamon. This card is awesome. I cannot sing its praises enough. I think that if you were looking, again, for a generic card that you can side in against those go-wide decks, this is a great option. Okay, so that's going to do it for our Megas and our Ultimates. We're going to go ahead and talk about level 7s. Now, level 7s, you're going to see a lot of these are probably the same over the different color shifted videos because a lot of them Digivolve from more than one color, and Red has quite a few to talk about. The primary ones that we're going to talk about, again, we're going to try to keep these generic. The biggest one, the most common one, or the most recognizable, I should say, is Omnimon from BT1. Now, this original Omnimon was the namesake of the Omnimon Blue and Omnimon Red archetypes, which were dominant in the format for the first couple of sets. Nowadays, this card has very much kind of faded from a lot of people's memories, but it is still a generic option, and if you are looking for a way to push your Megas to the next level, this level 7 still gets the job done. It's 15 to play, 15,000 DP, 6 to Digivolve from Red or Blue. Has a when Digivolving effect, choose one of your opponent's Digimon, and then delete all of your opponent's Digimon that share a name with it. So if your opponent is playing lots of Digimon of the same variety, for whatever reason, then you delete all of them at the same time. So if your opponent has 2 stacks in play, for instance, so again, if you're playing Bloom Hydra and they have, for instance, 2 Hydramons, you get to get rid of both of them at the same time. Now, it also has a when attacking effect. You can unsuspend this Digimon by returning a Digimon that is level 6 from this Digivolution sources to your hand, which can be great for closing the game out. Now, this is 6 to Digivolve, so being able to Digivolve into it and immediately swing in and get that effect is not going to happen super often. You're mostly going to be Digivolving, get the deletion effect in passing turn, but hey, it's an extra attack just in case they can't handle it before it gets back to you. Now, the other version of Omnimon that I personally am a little higher on, but does require at least a little bit more setup, is going to be Omnimon Merciful Mode. Now, Merciful Mode is it's a mouthful, so we're going to get through this pretty quick. 15 to play, 15,000 DP, again, 6 to Digivolve from Red, Blue, Yellow, or Green. You're going to be seeing a lot more of this card in future videos. It also has the ability to Digivolve for 3 onto a Digimon containing Omnimon in its name. Has a when Digivolving effect. For every card with Mega in their traits in this Digimon's Digivolution sources, delete one of your opponent's Digimon. Then you can place 10 cards from your opponent's trash at the bottom of their deck in any order. Also, at the start of your turn, you will trash the top card of this Digimon, and if you do, trash the top card of your opponent's security stack. So basically what that means is if he's still in play when it comes back to your turn, he will de-Digivolve himself back to your level 6, trash a card on his way out. Now, there's a couple of reasons you may want to be playing this Omnimon over the original. For one thing, it has that trash hate. So just like I mentioned already, we've talked about, there are going to be decks that are reliant on their trash having lots of cards in them. Being able to tuck all of up to 10 cards from their trash back under their deck can be backbreaking for certain strategies. And it also has a potentially higher ceiling than this Omnimon. This Omnimon can delete more than one if they have the same name. This Omnimon can delete more than one if you have more than one Mega in the stack. Whether you get there by X Digivolution, whether you get there by having another Omnimon in the stack, or ways to just get other Megas in your stack somehow, for instance, tucking them through things like Aegistramon, this Merciful Mode is able to potentially deal 2 destruction effects out, where the original could only get 1. So each one kind of has their ups and their downs, and you can kind of decide for yourself if you're looking for level 7s, which one of those is going to make more sense for you. Next is definitely the most common level 7 in the game by a wide margin. That's going to be Omnimon from BT5. Now this Omnimon is 15 to play, has 14,000 DP. It is only 4 to Digivolve from a Red or a Blue, but that is irrelevant. So this Digimon has a when Digivolving effect to Blitz, meaning it is able to attack when your opponent has memory. So if you Digivolve up into this and pass turn, you can immediately declare an attack, which normally is an okay effect, but it's not the most broken thing in the world. The reason this Omnimon is so powerful is it also has a when Digivolving effect to unsuspend. So if you have a Mega level threat in play, trash or hit your opponent's last security, the classic meta thing, the meta play is to Digivolve this Omnimon on top and Blitz for game, which has become the colloquial term for Blitz Omni, Blitz for game. You'll hear that used a lot in pretty much every format moving forward. This card is definitely not going anywhere. A lot of decks are using this in their flex slots because it is a way to end the game when you potentially wouldn't have been able to otherwise. Being able to pass turn and get a free attack is a very, very strong effect. Now, it also has an effect if you didn't happen to end the game right on the spot. If an opponent's effect would delete this Digimon or return it to its owner's hand or deck, you can prevent it from leaving play by trashing a level 6 Digimon from its Digivolution sources. So, a little extra icing on the cake there is worth mentioning. But yeah, this is definitely one of, if not the most played level 7 in the entire game right now. So, if you're again looking for ways to fill in your slots, most of the time I think people are going to be going with this guy. Now, there is another level 6 we'll talk about. That is Omnimon Alter S. This card, unfortunately, was power crept hard by the existence of Death Exmon, but it does still exist, and if Death Exmon does ever get banned, I think this card is worth considering as bringing back into meta-relevant play again. And this Alter S is 15 to play, 15,000 DP, again is 6 to Digivolve from red or black this time. Has a when Digivolving effect to de-Digivolve 1 all of your opponent's Digimon, then delete all of your opponent's Digimon with 5,000 DP or less. The big problem with this effect is Death Exmon does it better. So Death Exmon does not need to Digivolve from a level 6 in order to de-Digivolve your opponent's entire board, and it also doesn't have a DP cap. There are plenty of champion level Digimon out there nowadays that have 6,000 DP, which unfortunately means even if you de-Digivolve an ultimate down to a champion, you're not guaranteed to completely wipe them all out. Death Exmon just unfortunately does what Alter S does, but better. You're going to be very hard-pressed to find reasons to be playing this card over Death X currently, but again, let's say they ever do actually ban Death Exmon, then Alter S is very good. It's still a perfectly usable card and could absolutely come back into meta relevance once its biggest competition is removed from the spotlight. So these are going to be the primary level 7s. There are other red level 7s that exist, but a lot of them are archetype specific, or at least require some margin of setup. Agumon, Bond of Bravery, I consider using it, but since it requires you to also be playing Tamers, I didn't choose to include that particular card in this video, but there are still others, as there are for all of the levels that we've gone over up to this point. Now, for Tamers, this is going to be a pretty quick section. The Tamers that I would consider good generic for red, there's only really 3 of them. The big one is going to be Tai, of course. This is Tai from BT1. It is a memory setter, so it's 4 to play and set your memory to 3 at the start of your turn. Has a passive effect where on your turn, all of your red Digimon with 4 or more Digivolution cards get security attack +1. So no matter what deck you're playing, again, there's a very good chance that the deck you're playing is going to get to 4 Digivolution sources. Basically, in order to get there, you just need to have an egg, rookie, champion, ultimate. There's your 4. You're in your mega level at that point, and you get an extra security check. So Tai Kamiya is definitely one of the best tamers, again, if not the best tamer in the game, especially for red. This is a card that is going to very clearly hose itself into the red color, because it does specify your red Digimon with 4 sources, but it is still incredibly good, and a lot of stack building, in fact, most stack building decks still play this Tai because nothing else really does what it does. Another good generic red tamer, though, that a lot of people are also playing is Hero Amanakawa. Now, this hero is also a memory setter, 4 to play, set your memory to 3 start of turn, where if you attack with a Digimon that has Gamamon in its name or is level 5 or higher, you can suspend this tamer to give that Digimon plus 2,000 DP. This is, again, another tamer that is, because it is so nicely generic and has a memory set effect, does see play as the memory setter of choice in quite a few archetypes that don't actually have one. And this is actually a card that can see plenty of play outside of red, because it doesn't specify red. It just has to be level 5 or higher. Most decks do get to level 5, if not to level 6, so being able to give that Digimon plus 2,000 DP can make trading on the ultimate level a lot easier. It is a very powerful tamer and worth considering a slot for. And the last tamer I want to talk about is going to be Yoli Inoue. I apologize again for my pronunciation, but this is Yoli. Yoli is only 3 to play, as a start of your main phase effect, where if you have a red Digimon in play, gain an extra memory. Now, the reason I'm including her here, she does have another effect that is a little more specific to archetypes, where when one of your Digimon with 2 or more colors attacks, suspend this tamer to delete something 3,000 DP or less. Yes, that is going to require more build around. However, Yoli is, as far as I can tell, the only good red tamer that will actually gain you a memory above 3 for a cost of 3. So this Yoli basically is going to be there if you have a bunch of memory tamers or memory setters and you are looking for ways to go above 3 at the start of your turn. Yoli is a good card worth considering. All you need to do is just have a red Digimon in play and you will gain that extra memory. So she's worth considering as well. She's a perfectly serviceable tamer with a little bit of icing if you happen to be playing decks that play more than one color. Now this is going to be probably one of the longer sections of this video. We're going to wrap things up by talking about option cards. Option cards, when you're talking about sideboards, are also going to be one of the most common cards that you're going to see sideboards contain because there are a lot of options that do a lot of various things. Options tend to be more specifically tailored to very specific goals or strategies. It's where you're going to get all of your removal from, and lots of other effects can be contained within option cards. So we're not just talking about sideboard options, we're going to talking about staples. So we're going to begin by talking about all of the many, many options that are available for red removal. To begin with, we have the king of removal himself. This is Gaia Force. Gaia Force is a structure deck 1. This card, again, came out in the very first structure deck, and this is literally the standard for removal in Digimon. It is 8 to play. It is red, of course, and has just delete one of your opponent's Digimon with the security effect to activate this card's main effect. There are lots of effects out there that basically copy this in some way or another, but they are going to have different play costs. They're going to have limits on the Digimon they can delete. No matter what you're talking about, though, this is the standard for removal. 8 memory in order to delete anything your opponent has in play is the standard. So Gaia Force, no matter what you're playing, even today, if you don't have an archetype-specific removal spell, Gaia Force is still very, very worth considering for a sideboard option, or even main board if you're just, again, trying to find ways to fill a couple of extra slots. Now, we're going to talk about some of the other red options that are still generic, but do a Gaia Force imitation without actually doing a Gaia Force imitation. As I mentioned, there's going to be things that are different. The primary one is going to be Direct Smasher. Now, this is a card from the new Ragnar Lordmon structure deck. It is 7 memory, has an effect where if you have a Digimon with Legend Arms and its traits in play, you can use it without meeting its color requirements. Kind of irrelevant in this context, but its main effect lets you delete one of your opponent's Digimon that has the highest DP. So basically the trade-off here, as I mentioned, this is the standard, so you're going to have things that are slightly different for different cards. This is basically trading that 1 memory, so it's 7 to play, where you don't get to choose which Digimon you're deleting, you're just going to hit their biggest Digimon. There are going to be very few situations where that 1 memory is going to be worth trading original Gaia Force for this. And the same can be said of even a lot of the archetypal Gaia Forces that are out there as well, but some of them do carry benefits that make them worthwhile. In this particular case, this is just a good example of cards that are very similar to the original removal spell itself, but the trade-offs usually aren't worth it. If you are looking for generic removal, Gaia Force is usually the way to go. Now, talking about red specifically, red also has a plethora of effects that deal with wide board states. It's actually, in my opinion, the best color in the game for handling wide board states. To begin with, we're going to talk about the card Happy Bullet Showering. This is 7 to play. You can use it without meeting its color requirements if you have a 3 Musketeers in play. Has the effect to delete all of your opponent's Digimon with the lowest DP. So instead of going highest DP and just deleting one thing, you can instead go lowest and delete everything on their board that costs or has the lowest amount of DP. So you can potentially delete more than one thing. And of course has the effect to activate its main effect if it's checked in security. This card is mostly used in Beelstarmon decks just as an extra go-wide removal option, but it's still red and it's still worth considering. However, if you are going for a board wipe that is going to hit multiple things, all of the following cards I do think are a bit better. The first one is going to be Gigastorm. Gigastorm saw quite a bit of play back when it first came out in BT7, but again has kind of been power crept out. It's 7 to play and deletes up to 2 of your opponent's Digimon with 8,000 DP or less. Being able to hit 2, generally ultimate or below Digimon, is still a very good effect, but again, it's just kind of gotten to the point where there's better ways to do that. One of those better ways is Atomic Blaster. Now, Atomic Blaster in particular, it's going to be better and worse than Gigastorm in certain ways. So Blaster is only 5 to play, so we're getting cheaper, but since it is cheaper, it's also a bit more narrow in what you can use it for. This option card lets you choose any number of your opponent's Digimon whose total DP is 8,000 or less, and then delete them. Another alteration of that, we also have Atomic Megaloblaster. By adding 1 memory cost, so it's 6 to play, you choose any number of your opponent's Digimon with 10,000 DP and delete them. So basically, if your opponent has a lot of smaller bodies in play, these are pretty good sideboard cards where you can hit multiples of them for the cost of one card. Being able to, again, you can choose if you want to go 5 memory or 6 memory for that extra 2,000 to be added on. I do think the 2,000 DP is probably worth it, but both of these cards are very worth considering. And the last removal spell that we have to talk about, because again, this is definitely the creme de la creme when it comes to removal these days, is going to be Crimson Blaze. If you are playing red and you are playing a sideboard, this card should be in at least one copy somewhere in your 55. Your 50 main board, 5 sideboard, you should be playing at least one copy of this no matter what archetype you're playing. Crimson Blaze is 6 to play, but you reduce that cost for every Digimon your opponent has in play. So if they have 6, it is going to be free. It has the effect to delete all of your opponent's Digimon with 6,000 DP or less. Then your opponent cannot play Digimon by effects until the end of their next turn. This will absolutely shut off certain playstyles. This is phenomenal against Bloom Hydra, Jessmon, pretty much any of the Go Wide decks I've already mentioned, Idristramon, they're all similar. This is a card that will keep certain archetypes honest, and preventing them from playing Digimon is also very relevant. There are certain decks that really need to be able to play Digimon to do what their deck wants to do. Crimson Blaze is probably one of, again, if not the strongest option card available in red. It's definitely up there. So Crimson Blaze, if you are playing red in Digimon, you need to find a spot for at least one of these somewhere in your main board or your sideboard. You're going to want to see it in at least some matchups. That's going to do it for removal. This is, again, just generic removal. There are plenty of other removal cards that exist in Digimon. These are specifically removal cards that you can play in any archetype, no matter what it is that you're doing, no matter what your strategy is, you can use those. But of course, there's going to be plenty of other option cards. So we're going to talk about now some of the cool tech options that you can play if you want looking to fill some flex slots. To begin with, every color has an option card that is going to help cheat memory in some way. Gain memory, or basically give you memory advantage. In red, that card is Gravity Crusher. Gravity Crusher is 0 memory and will gain you 2 memory when you play it. So it's very similar to Hammer Spark, where Hammer Spark just gives you 1 memory. Gravity Crush instead gives you 2, but at the end of your turn, you then lose 2 memory. Now that's actually pretty easy to play around. If your opponent has a memory tamer in play, and you're able to choke your opponent at 1 at the end of the turn, then you're already just going to be giving them, putting them to 3 anyways. So it's pretty nice that you can just basically gain 2 memory for ultimately no cost as long as you can play around it. There are going to be decks that are trying to get blitz attacks or big like OTKs in. Gravity Crusher can be very good in certain decks that are looking to get those bigger, more explosive turns. So again, this is something that might be worth considering for you. All colors also have a standard memory boost. This in particular, of course, is red memory boost. All the memory boosts share the same general effect, which is going to be 3 to play. You're going to reveal the top 4 cards of your deck. You can add any red Digimon in this case from among them to your hand, put the rest on the bottom, then place this card in your battle area. So basically, once this is used, you just kind of put it there. And then on a future turn, it has a delay effect where on a turn, except the turn this card was put in that battle area, you can then trash this and gain an extra 2 memory. Memory boosts have been and still remain complete staples in the meta. Now, their usage is going to vary depending on the kind of decks that are out there. Decks that have a lot of inherent memory gain don't necessarily need these, but decks that are trying to build consistent stacks, since you're going to be checking 4 cards, this is a phenomenal consistency card as well as memory advantage on a future turn. And all of these memory boosts all have the effect where if you check them in security, you can immediately put it into your battle area. So very, very strong. Now, Gravity Crush, it is worth mentioning, since we're talking about memory advantage, this, if checked in security, has no effect. It won't go to hand. It will not use any abilities. It just gets trashed. So there is a downside there. But in the same line as consistency, talking about getting card filtering off the top of your deck, red also has 2 other cards that are worth considering in the form of Hero of the Skies and Fireball. Now, these 2 cards are card draw engines, and they're definitely worthwhile. You'll see these pop up every once in a while in various archetypes. Fireball tends to be the more common. It is 2 memory and lets you delete one of your opponent's Digimon with 3,000 DP or less. If an opponent's Digimon is not deleted by this effect, draw 2 cards. That's really the primary reason you use it. It is 1 card that will give you 2. Now, there are some cards that will draw you 1 card. I think, oh goodness, I got to go back and double check the card that does it, but there's a blue card that has 1 memory to draw 1 card. not quite as worth it. One card turning into 2 cards is much different than one card turning into 1 card in Digimon terms. So being able to draw 2 cards off of your deck for only 2 memory and the cost of a single card from your hand is very powerful. And decks that are trying to, again, build specific stacks and want consistency can use Fireball to help smooth those draws out. Hero of the Skies is very similar, but it trades that deletion effect, which can actually be a hindrance in some cases, where you may not be able to draw 2 if they have something within that deletion range. It is also 2 to play, and activates one of the following effects, unless you have a Digimon with Shoutmon Cross 5, in which case you can activate them both. The first effect is one of your Digimon with Cross Hearts gains Security Attack +1, so archetype specific, but the second effect is that same generic effect, 2 memory, draw 2 cards. So both of these are basically very standard, draw extra cards from your deck. They can go a long way, and again, if you're building specific decks where you're trying to get very big hands or need to see a lot of cards very quickly, you're definitely going to want some copies of these. Now the last 2 cards are just some fun tech cards that I wanted to make sure I talked about. The first one is going to be Lightning Joust. Lightning Joust is only 1 memory to play, gives one of your Digimon plus 2000 DP, and then if you have fewer security cards than your opponent does, you get Security Attack +1 on that Digimon. So basically this is a 1 memory card that will give you an extra check, which again, if you're trying to swing for game for 1 memory, you can potentially get an extra check as long as you play around needing less security than your opponent. So that's super neat. And the last card that we're going to be talking about is, again, one of the strongest red cards that are out there. This is going to be a Delicate Plan. Forget strongest red cards. I think a Delicate Plan might be a contender for the strongest option card in the entire game. A Delicate Plan for a single memory lets you, excuse me, give one of your Digimon the ability to not check any security effects on any security that it checks for the rest of that turn. So no security Digimon effects, no option cards. You are shutting down everything. There are so many decks that play a Delicate Plan right now. This card is phenomenal, and currently outside of BT1 War Greymon, there is no other cards in the game that do what this card does. Being able to shut off all of your opponent's security effects is insanely strong. This is, again, a very, very powerful card that's going to see a lot of play in sideboards, in decks, especially with like OTK decks that are worried about hitting problematic cards in security. Now, both Lightning Joust and Delicate Plan have effects and security to add them to hand, as does Hero of the Skies. So you're not going to get these, you're not going to worry about checking these and then wasting them. If you check these cards, they actually go straight to your hand and let them use those effects on your turn. So very cool in that regard, where they're not going to be dead if they're in security. In fact, if you happen to check it and add it to your hand, that can potentially give you game on the following turn, depending on how well set up you are. So yeah, that's going to about do it, guys. I know this has been a very long video, but hopefully this video has been helpful for some of you guys. One of the biggest discussions I see a lot of people having is around Death Exmon in particular. That's actually what gave me the idea for this video series. Death Exmon is currently being played in pretty much everything because it is a catch-all. Death Exmon is a card that is very good against almost every strategy that is out there, so there's not much of a reason to play other tech cards. Let's say that we eventually find a world where Death Exmon no longer exists and gets banned from the Digimon TCG. These are the kinds of cards that people are going to start looking at to help fill that void. You're going to want cards that are going to help you in specific matchups, and there's still going to be cards that you're going to want to help fill extra space in your main deck with. Hopefully these cards are going to be able to fill some of those slots for you guys. Maybe there's some cards in here you guys didn't know or hadn't heard about in a while. A lot of these don't see main meta play. A lot of them do. But yeah, hopefully this video was fun for you guys. If you like this idea and want to see more staple videos, I am planning on making them. But hey, let me know in the comments down below any ways that I can improve this format and make it more enjoyable for you guys. Thank you all once again for joining me. Again, I am an avid herpetologist. I hope you guys all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all next time.